Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning for the webinar. We appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule. No doubt a few more people will be logging on as we begin. My name is Mike Cooney. I'm a Director of International Trade and Development for Enterprise Florida's International Trade and Development Team. I also have a responsibility, in addition to 10 counties in Central Florida, helping companies to export more. I also have responsibility for aviation, aerospace and defense statewide, which I'll mention in just a moment. I'll just mention a couple of housekeeping items. First, everyone that's a participant will be muted. Your camera will be turned off. Only the speakers will be available on camera or, of course, to speak. Feel free to post any questions you may have either in the chat box or in the Q&A, and then we will either try to respond to those in real time as time permits, and we'll also try to handle as many questions for our panelists toward the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. I'm sure the majority of the people on this presentation, or excuse me, on the call as participants, are well aware of Enterprise Florida, but for those of you who may not be for whatever reason, Enterprise Florida is the state's economic development organization. We have several responsibilities. The two that are most well known would be the business development as well as international trade and development. On the business development team, those folks are working to attract companies to Florida from other parts of the US and around the world, and as well helping companies to expand and stay in Florida. Then there's the international trade and development side, of which I, along with others throughout the state, help companies export more. And we work a great deal with manufacturers as well as other sectors that I'll talk about in a moment. We also work closely with quite a number of partners throughout the state, including other economic development organizations, U.S. Commercial Service, XM Bank, the SBDC, Small Business Development Centers. So those are all part of the team that helps companies throughout the state of Florida. Next slide, please. The industry sectors that we support are, as you see them there, probably the two that receive the most attention, not all the attention, but most of the attention, would be life sciences and the sector that I'm responsible for, aviation, aerospace, and defense. Certainly the others that are mentioned there are equally important, but as a state mandate or a state priority, life sciences, aviation, and aerospace. And the reason I say that is because we put together what we call Florida pavilions at major trade shows around the world each year. And those are the two that are most focused on. We also have marine, the marine industry is another industry, although not on the list, it is still a priority. Next slide, please. Enterprise Florida has 5 grants. Most people who are familiar with Enterprise Florida think we only have one, and that's the trade show grant. So for companies that are participating in trade shows around the world, outside of the US specifically, companies can receive 75%, up to $7,500 toward the cost of the booth, and the booth only. It does not cover any sort of transportation cost, shipping, employees staying at hotels, et cetera. It is only toward the cost of the booth. Again, 75% up to a maximum of $7,500. As a result of COVID, we've also begun supporting the virtual trade shows, of which there are many these days. I'll speak about one in just a few minutes that is specific to Enterprise Florida, but the virtual trade shows are not ideal for obvious reasons. Everyone wants to get back to shows, and we're certainly hoping to do that next year. But for the time being, the virtual trade shows have become very popular, and we have a trade grant for that will cover up to $2,500. We also have a website localization grant. That is a grant for companies that are interested in having 2 websites in 2 native languages of 2 new markets that they want to penetrate. They can be any markets outside of the US. They can even be English-speaking markets. The websites are developed around the existing website that a company might have. They can choose these 2 languages based on, obviously, where they see the majority of their customers either coming from or where they would like to penetrate that market. We contract with a company out of the UK called IBT. So anyone that would like more information about this grant, please contact your trade manager and you'll see who they are a little later. That particular grant covers $8,000 out of a $12,000 cost. So the total cost is $12,000, the grant is $8,000. The company then pays $4,000 for 2 websites in 2 native languages. We also have an international registration grant, and a number of companies find this to be very helpful. A number of my aviation companies, for example, have used it, and that is a grant that will cover 50% up to $10,000 for a company to receive a certification or a registration in order to do business in a new country. So if a company is required to have that registration or certification, they can apply for it. They can also apply for the grant. And if they are eligible, they can receive as much as 50% up to $10,000 toward the cost of that grant. The export marketing plan is an amazing tool. I just sat through a presentation yesterday. Probably I've sat through now 24 of them in the past 2 years. It's a document that's presented and prepared by the small business development centers throughout the state. The document itself is highly proprietary to that company. It contains an enormous amount of data and information about what are the best markets for a company based on that company's products and services. It is unique to that company. No other company would have the same data because of the different services and products. The cost of that is $5,000. Enterprise Florida covers $4,500. And that then remains $500 cost to the company. If you were to go out and pay a private consultant, that document could easily cost you $30,000. So it's highly valuable. It's a great tool, especially for companies that aren't quite sure exactly where they should be exporting. Last but not least, I'll talk briefly about the Gold Key. This is another grant that we have available. And this is, again, pre-COVID, whereby companies that wanted 3 to 5 pre-qualified meetings before they arrived at a destination somewhere outside the US would work with the US Commercial Service in order to arrange those meetings. Now we have, until such time as we can return to travel, the virtual business matchmaking, which is the essence of this particular webinar. So you'll hear more about that shortly. Next. And I want to promote the Florida International Trade Expo. You'll see this again toward the end of the presentation. This is a unique opportunity for Florida manufacturers and service providers to be on the world stage. It's a virtual show that will be held next March. And you can see the website there that you can go to find out more information. And again, if you are interested, I recommend you contact your trade managers, and you'll see who those are a little later. Next slide. Let's take a quick poll just to understand exactly who our audience is and who is on the line. So please present the poll. Please click on whichever applies to you. I'll give you a few more seconds. Close the poll, please. And let's see the results. So that's a very good mix. It's interesting. This is the 4th webinar we've done on the virtual business matchmaking, and this is pretty consistent with what we've seen elsewhere, a good number of manufacturers and other service providers. Next slide, please. With that, I will introduce my esteemed colleague, Joseph Bell, who handles many responsibilities, including is responsible for the continent of Africa. Joseph, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Mike, for the introduction, but more importantly, the very important information that you presented. I know some of the companies or participants on this, you know, if they are not familiar with those programs, they're probably saying, wow, I did not know Enterprise Florida offered those kinds of programs for or resources for companies to go global. So again, my name is Joseph Bell, and I serve as a regional manager with Enterprise Florida, advising companies across the state about export opportunities utilizing Enterprise Florida international trade programs. I also direct the Enterprise Florida Trade Expansion Program. In this role, I facilitate strategic engagement and outreach to promote trade and investment between Florida and the continent. Florida has been among the few long-standing U.S. states with a trade office on the continent, more specifically beginning with South Africa going back 2001. We have since added trade associates in Kenya and Tanzania. And these trade representatives are able to support Florida companies looking for Africa market access. Some of the support services will be discussed by the presenters this morning. But let me just talk a little about why Africa. And publication, according to a publication by the Harvard Business Review, it spells out that Africa is a $1.2 billion person market in the midst of an historic economic acceleration. Africa has huge unfulfilled demand, making it ripe for entrepreneurship and innovation at scale. So these are just two examples of why we should start considering and looking at Africa. And so with that being said, I would like to now introduce you to our team in Africa. I will start with Abigail Ellery, who serves as the Director of Enterprise Florida Southern Africa office, and she will go and introduce her team. But Abigail support Enterprise Florida mission by overseeing the international trade development and foreign direct investment efforts all over Africa since 2012. She manages priority markets like the Southern Africa Development Community, or what we call SADC, comprising of 15 member states, including Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and South Africa. Mrs. Ellery has been responsible for creating new trade opportunities between Florida and Africa business entities, enhancing existing economic development activities, working on strategies geared toward promoting Florida as a business destination, and managing all government and private sector relationships across Africa on behalf of Enterprise Florida. With that said, I would like to turn it over to you, Abigail, to begin your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Mike. Good morning. It's great to be here. I have had a scroll through the list of attendees, and I do see some familiar names. So want to say hello to our friends. And if you haven't had the privilege of interacting with us, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Our hope is that this session is informative, inspiring, and beneficial as you consider Africa in your trade plans. What I hope to cover during this presentation is just an orientation to the Enterprise Florida Africa team and operations, to touch briefly on the size of the Africa opportunity, to give you snapshots of the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC. This will be followed by a specific focus on markets like South Africa, Kenya, and Tanzania. And at that point, you will also hear from our associates in those two markets, just to mix it up a little bit. And we'll finish our talk time with a rundown of Enterprise Florida, Southern Africa, the trade activities that we engage in to support Florida companies, either directly or through our strategic partner network across the continent. We would like to keep things interesting for easy listening and watching. And so we'll keep our smiles on, and we promise not to overwhelm you with statistics or factoids. Just to start off, Enterprise Florida, as Joseph mentioned, has been in South Africa since 2012. So a strong, solid history of close on to 19 years. I've managed the program since 2012. And we have incredible associates that work with us in team in South Africa, the major cities of South Africa, as well as in East Africa, Kenya and Tanzania. Our primary mandates are around trade and foreign direct investment. And whilst we support and promote two-way trade, most of our resources are applied to the support of Florida companies looking at access in the markets we cover on the continent. We have a small team of passionate trade associates and advisors that supports with just the full spectrum of FDI and trade services that Mike Cooney had mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. This is our wonderful team of trade associates. Most are on the call this morning, so you can look out for them. Again, these trade associates are just based mostly in South Africa and East Africa. We have Charmaine Martin that is based in Johannesburg, Christina Visa, who consults for us on an ad hoc basis in Durban. We have Emmanuel Mbevi, who we will get to hear from later on in Kenya. And then our newlyweds are Namala and Roderick out of Tanzania, which bears testament to how effective we are at linkages and matchmaking. I'm just kidding. Next slide, please. Joseph was great in just sharing those 2 points about, why Africa. And I thought I'd start with a little bit of inspiration as well. I know that 2020 has just been intense with world dramas, with uncertainties and even loss. And everything that can possibly be shaken, whether on a personal or professional level, has been shaken. So most of us, are asking, what is the business of business in these times? And our response, whether you're looking at Africa or any other market, is just that we keep going for it. We keep persevering the thing we know to do. And just to encourage us all that no matter the gloom of the global economic horizon, Africa remains a bright spot. It is still open for business. It still holds incredible potential with so many emerging markets, and still aims for growth, progress, and profitability. And so businesses with a positive, overcoming, creative mindset will reap the benefits of doing business in Africa, no matter the times. I love Nelson Mandela's quote where he says that it always seems impossible until it's done. And so we are here to help you with what may appear to be impossible. We continue in the things we know to do, which is to support with linkages and connections in international trade. Next slide, please. I absolutely love sharing this slide called True Size of Africa. It's just a visual perspective of the size of opportunity. Just the inspiring and compelling graphic just illustrates the physical size of the continent. If you consider the area is able to fit in prominent nations and even part of the Europe continent. More than that, Africa is home to around 1.3 billion consumers, and Florida is the closest state geographically to the continent. So from a logical, geographical, and opportunistic perspective, it makes sense to consider African nations in your export plans. It's important to look at the future of Africa, as you look at the future of Africa, to note the Africa Intercontinental Free Trade Agreement, which was meant to be signed off in July 2020, and includes 54 of the 55 African Union nations. This would make up the world's largest free trade area and participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The idea is the merging of 54 countries into a single market of 1.3 billion people, and to deepen economic integration on the continent, to enhance sustainable markets. And this could create an economic bloc with a combined GDP of almost $3.5 trillion, with possible consumer and business spending of close to $7 trillion by 2030. The agreement also requires members to remove tariffs from 90% of goods, allowing free access of commodities, goods, and services across the continent. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa estimates this agreement will boost intra-Africa trade substantially, and some predict as much as 52% by 2022. Again, this agreement is supposed to be finalized by December, so we need to just stay tuned, and stay tuned for just the tariffs being finalizing by December. Next slide, please. This is just a visual of the markets that we give priority focus to. which is the Southern Africa Development Community Markets, which actually has 16 members. The Comoros was recently added in. The thing in addition to SADC to note is that the Common Market for East and Southern Africa, COMESA, the East African Community, which is the EAC, and the Southern African Development Community in July of this year adopted harmonized tripartite guidelines on trade and transport facilitation guidelines. And this was all around COVID, just for the efficient and cost-effective movement of goods and services during the pandemic. So what we left is with immediate opportunities to support movement of goods and services and the promotion of intra-regional trade and cooperation between SADC, COMESA, and EAC. Next slide, please. It's wonderful to now just give you some insight into my home country, South Africa, a country of nearly 58 million people and the world's most colorful and beautiful nation. South Africa, also known as the Rainbow Nation, is rich in diverse cultures and natural heritage. And whilst there are 11 official languages, the language of business is English, which is really convenient. At this point also, I just want to emphasize that no matter the world dramas, these factors remain unchanged about South Africa. South Africa is still the most advanced broad-based economy in the continent of Africa. It offers exporters, investors, just people interested in doing business, a very diverse and mature economy. It remains sophisticated in financial, legal, and business service sectors. South Africa is still positioned as an entryway to other markets on the continent, especially with strong, very capable, already networked South African companies that serve as good trade partners for countries on the continent. South Africa still enjoys US branded goods. US branded goods are still highly reputed and enjoyed. And South Africa is still a destination largely conducive to US trade and investments, and a local attractive choice for Florida companies looking to enter the African continent. It's almost a soft takeoff. Historically, in terms of opportunities, the best prospects for US exporters, for Florida exporters, have been in capital goods, in consumer products, in services, even franchising. And in South Africa's primary, secondary, and tertiary industry sectors, which include agriculture and mining, manufacturing, construction, and utilities, in trade, transport, and services. And more recently, we have fourth industrial revolution opportunities that have been heightened. Just solutions, innovations around digitization, and these exist in manufacturing and automation and advanced robotics. Everything from 3D printing to artificial intelligence, cloud computing, just the Internet of Things, payment systems, mail order validation, drones, doing remote medical delivery, solutions like the FAMAG, your Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and so forth. And then digitizing the supply chain is no longer this nice to have, but it's become imperative to maintain visibility and just manage supply chain risks. And also freight and shipping innovative solutions and platforms. And largely in the manufacturing sector, digital technologies and digitally enabled services are heavily used in advanced manufacturing, electronics, and so forth. Next slide, please. I just want to touch on this very briefly, just in terms of emerging markets. If you have an interest in emerging markets, I just want to point out that when one compares with 14 other emerging markets like Australia, Canada, Poland, Spain, Colombia, Chile, all of those countries that are listed, South Africa ranks really highly in terms of financial markets, business tax rates, infrastructure, getting credits, business and investor protection. So all that's left to say is that it is an open economy. It's a sound case for business and for trade. Next slide, please. And if you look at South Africa in terms of the BRICS group of countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and then South Africa, all formed the BRICS group of emerging markets in 2012. South Africa ranks the highest in terms of the ease of doing business. So our encouragement to you is, if you are doing business in the emerging markets mentioned in the previous slide, or these BRICS group of countries, your China, Russia, Brazil, and India, South Africa is definitely your next business destination to kick off. Next slide, please. This slide is just to demonstrate the very healthy trading patterns between South Africa and the US. You see both on the import side as well as exports that South Africa, the United States, is among the top 3 of South Africa's trading partners. Next slide, please. I wanted to drill down to the trading relationships between South Africa and Florida. We have always promoted and encouraged South Africa and Florida as complementary markets, just because of the similarities, you know, in terms of Florida being this gateway market into North and South America, into the Caribbean basin, and then South Africa being this soft takeoff into the rest of the continent. It also shares in some of the best prospect and growth industries, namely in your aviation, IT, clean tech, all the high innovation industries. We have found over the years that the Florida companies that we've supported have been in these industries, though not limited to it. So it's everything from aviation, life science, pharmaceuticals, food and beverage, ICT, telecom, construction and mining, strategic partners, ports and airports. So just a diverse industry sector. And with the import and export numbers, it's pretty balanced, though actually more in Florida's favor. So Florida is exporting more than it is importing from South Africa, as you would see from the numbers represented. Next slide, please. I would just like to point out that whilst we're sharing South Africa, Kenya, and Tanzania fact sheets, we do have country fact sheets for the following countries that are on the screen, and we would be glad to share that with you over and above what's on this presentation. It has not been included just for time's sake. At this point, I'm going to take a breather, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to hand you over to my colleague and friend in Kenya, Emmanuel Mbevi, who will now take over and just give you insight into Kenya. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Abigail. And good morning, everyone. Good afternoon from a bustling Nairobi city out here in East Africa. Yes, this is Emmanuel Mbevi. I'm a trade associate with Enterprise Florida. I've been to your beautiful Sunshine State, and my application for permanent residence is still pending. I can't wait to join you permanently. It's just the most beautiful place. I want to just take the next few minutes and talk about Kenya and just raise a few highlights. You can see some numbers and statistics on your screen. Kenya is East Africa's largest economy, and it's largely considered to be the economic, commercial, and logistics hub. We've seen very strong PE, private equity capital inflows in recent years, and a greater interest from US companies coming into this economy and investing in Kenya. We are talking about the region. We have a robust intra-regional trade with our neighboring countries. You'll be hearing from our close neighbor in a bit, but East Africa community is comprised of 5 countries. And we have a population in Kenya of just over 50 million, as you can see. But if you put the region together, you're talking about just over 200 million residents that you have access to in coming to do business here in Kenya. And actually, Ethiopia to the north, we are increasing our cooperation and our trade with them. And if you add Ethiopia, then you're over 300 million. So this is just about a quarter of the continent represented in this region, which is quite a huge number. We are characterized out here by our very large youthful population, which is a great asset. Approximately 70% of our population is under 35. And so you're talking about a young, passionate, driven, entrepreneurial, English-speaking population. And they, you know, we have just the ability to integrate, and the multilingual aspect has been a great asset to all companies coming in. Nairobi is a capital city, as I mentioned earlier on, the largest city between Johannesburg and Cairo, a city that almost never sleeps. You get caught up in traffic and get in big trouble if you're not careful. This is my hometown. I'm very proud of it. We have the largest airport, international airport, is right here in Nairobi, just outside Nairobi. It's called Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. And we handle about 12 million passengers per annum going through Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Our second largest city, as you can see there. Before I go to Mombasa, the shot on your bottom right is a very unique shot. I believe Nairobi is the only city where you have a national park right in the city. That is not superimposed. Those are real animals, and those are real skyscrapers next to each other. That's one of the things we really pride ourselves in. So come to Nairobi and you get it all. So our second largest city, Mombasa, is a deep, the most important deep water port, again, in the region, serving a dozen countries, an absolute gateway into the region. Last year, the numbers of TEUs that Mombasa handled was 1.5 million, which by our standards is quite sizable. And so that's our second largest city. I just want to touch now on some of the major sectors, which, as you can see, some are highlighted there. Just want to talk about agriculture. You can see agriculture there. That's, our biggest industry sector, our largest employer, contributing close to a third of our GDP. And there's tremendous opportunities in the agricultural space. We are exporters of tea, exporters of coffee, cut flowers, and vegetables. I'll also touch on information, communication, and technology. We call it ICT. That's one of the fastest growing sectors out here. Our internet speeds are very, very fast. It's renowned to be the fastest south of the Sahara. You can check that out. I'm not just blowing my trumpet, but ICT is really bustling. And we are a regional leader in value-added services in the mobile technology space. We have a product that originated out of Kenya, mobile banking. It's called M-Pesa, and it's gone around the world. It's award-winning. M-Pesa, basically, our mobile wallets are everything for us. We pay for all goods and services using our phones. We have 250,000 little agents spread out across the nation and into the region as well. And you can imagine in every remote area where you don't even have a point of sale machine, we're just using our phones to pay for goods, pay for services. You go into a hospital, you use your phone. You go into a supermarket, you use your phone to pay. Just about the only thing you can't pay for is for your birth and maybe for your death, because you won't be there. But really, mobile technology and the mobile banking has really actually eclipsed conventional card systems, debit and credit cards by 10 times. You can imagine that. So in ICT and in mobile technology, there's very, very fast growing and tremendous opportunities there. I want to just touch on tourism, which is our third largest sector. And we have, droves of tourists coming in, and we have a wonderful coast, and a Masai Mara, which is also a world-renowned reserve. And that's one of the things that we have piggybacked on Florida about, because there's a lot we can learn, with Florida being one of the leading tourist destinations in the world. Mining has come up recently, and we are now starting to extract minerals such as titanium. And we are also now in the oil and gas space. We've started exploration a few years ago. 1 billion barrels of oil have been discovered next door in Uganda, about a third of that here in Kenya. And so this is a sector that's rapidly coming up, oil and gas exploration. I want to highlight, out of the various industry sectors, 4 particular industries that will be, sectors that will be of interest to you, mainly because they're being driven very strongly by our current administration. We have an administration in office now for the next 2 years. Our general election is going to be in 2022. And this administration wants to drive growth and create an impact, leave a legacy built on 4 pillars. And that is food security, manufacturing, affordable housing, and universal health care. And so these are 4 absolute focus sectors that, I'm not sure what, depending on what line you're in, I hope one of these could jump out to you. There's a very strong push by our government, and the legislation has been put in place to attract, participation in these sectors, to attract investment in these sectors, and to roll out projects. Private-public partnership is a strong priority by the government of Kenya here. And so there's lots of projects running out and strongly supported by the authorities, and obviously infrastructure projects as well. So I will stop there. It's a brief one, but I will hand over now to Tanzania and my colleague Roderick. I hope Roderick is with us. Yes.
Yes, hello everyone. I don't know if I'm unmuted. Yes, I am. Perfect. Good morning to the people in the US, and good afternoon to people in South Africa, and my colleagues in South Africa, and hello, Emmanuel. As he mentioned, I'll be talking about Tanzania. I guess as you see on the screen, there's just a little bit of a brief and a highlight of Tanzania. Emmanuel did mention a little bit about Kenya and tourism. I would also like to say that Tanzania is a country of immense beauty. It's inhabited by friendly and warm-hearted people. It's also the land of the Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa. The Zanzibar, which is an exotic island with rich culture and unique history. And also the Serengeti, the world's biggest national park. It wouldn't do me much justice to kind of not mention the tourism side of Tanzania while doing this. Tanzania's geographical location also simplifies export of products to neighboring countries. Similar to Kenya, Kenya is our neighbor. It shares borders with 8 countries. So not just Kenya, but Uganda in the north, Burundi, Rwanda, and the DRC on the west. You also have Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique on the south. So this leaves trade opportunities for international investors looking for larger markets. So when I'm speaking about Tanzania, it's not just the 55 million population. There's over 150 million people within not only just with our neighbors, but also mainly specifically for the East African community. Also on that, in December of 2018, the key members of the East African community, which also includes Kenya. They struck an agreement that made trade between them cheaper, faster, and more straightforward, which is a significant boost for economic integration in East Africa and continental trade facilitation. Just to give you a few numbers, I don't want to say too much data during this presentation, but according to the United Nations Comtrade database on international trade, Tanzania exports to Kenya. The last key figures that I could find were from 2018. That was about 338 million. Exports to Rwanda were 685 million. Tanzania exports to Uganda were shy 194 million, but also exports from Kenya to Uganda 610 million. So you can definitely see not just, they're not just signing treaties for the sake of signing treaties, but for the companies that are looking to do business within Kenya or Tanzania, there's definitely, business opportunities across these countries. Now, these numbers might be low compared to regions outside of Africa, but it's still, they're still the highest among regional economic communities in Africa at over 20% of exports. If I could just start with the key sector for Tanzania, which is agriculture, because much of the population in most of the East African community countries still lives in rural areas. So agriculture is still the biggest economic sector in Tanzania. For Tanzania, it represents a little over a quarter of Tanzania's GDP and almost 3/4 of its productive workforce. Now, the opportunities still lie in advanced machinery and technology. We still have NGOs in different catering to different cash crops here in Tanzania, either providing pesticides or machinery. Also because it's seasonal agriculture, and much of the agriculture does not use irrigation. So there's massive opportunities for warehousing because prices really do skyrocket. The difference, just to give you an example, now this might not translate as well when we're talking about T shillings, but let's say right now a kilo of tomatoes can go for 1,000 shillings, but during the rainy season, one tomato will be 500 shillings, so half of that. Just to, if I convert that to dollars, it will be quite little, almost pennies, cents. But for the Tanzanian national, I can tell you that is quite a big difference. So that's a huge warehouse, there's big warehousing opportunities there. But also in terms of storage, you find there's huge losses of fisheries because of lack of proper storage. They experience losses of over 30%. We need better processing lines, as I mentioned, in terms of advanced machinery and technology. And also just vehicles, because for companies that offer logistics services, there's definitely massive opportunities. Much of the, we're still trying to build a railway line that moves goods. There is, movement of goods through rail at the moment, but there's construction of a big railway line that will go from Dar es Salaam to Dodoma into other regions. So for now, still transportation of goods is still, through road, and there's huge challenges there. And this is part of the reason that during the rainy season, power prices skyrocket. Just to also just touch a little bit on the healthcare sector. The medical stores department is by far the biggest procurer of medicines and medical equipment for Tanzania, spending over $800 million annually. It's noted huge potential for investors that meet two criteria. If you're looking to enter the Tanzanian market, you need to produce medicines and medical equipment that meets, of course, international standards. But also the biggest, I would say, reasons why they can be a roadblock entering many African markets and not just Tanzania is because of price. So many companies coming from the US, even though it's a product that would, Tanzania or other African countries would like, sometimes the price point doesn't make sense. Ourselves, we've dealt with our trade missions here for within the medical industry, and you can find even for doctors here, one of the biggest reasons when they're discussing these meetings and saying, okay, does the company, are they even coming with a product we can afford before I even take the meeting? So just affordability factor is key. But that being said, Tanzania imports 89% of its medicines, 100% of its medical devices, and it manufactures 11% of all pharmaceuticals. This is according to the Medical Stores Department Managing Director, Lorraine Mwanakunu, who I said the MSD is the biggest procurer of medicines and medical equipment here in Tanzania. So that's importing 89% of medicines, 100% of medical devices, and manufactures 11% of all pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceutical market is focused to grow to 700 million by 2021, and the country's healthcare spending is expected to reach 3.9 billion or close to 4 billion, up from 2.7 billion in 2017. For the ICT sector, there's a huge market for companies that sell second-hand computers or second-hand hardware. You still find, for example, even though our capital city, which is Dodoma, it was made the capital in 1974, it's only 2 years ago that the government decided that they should move to these capitals. For this whole time they've been in Dar es Salaam. So, with this movement, there's huge opportunities for hardware within the new capital. Of course, that also meet a reasonable price points. Students in Tanzania also need reasonably priced computers. There's still a huge lack of laptops. Yes, so yeah, for second-hand computers coming with no for that limited. For example, Emmanuel spoke a little bit about M-Pesa applications and software. We use M-Pesa here in Tanzania, and as he mentioned, mobile wallet is key. With mobile wallet becoming a key factor in the country, it's started bringing new opportunities for different applications and softwares that were very tough to kind of bring in for people to use on their smartphones, because many people do not use credit cards. So with mobile wallets, just about everybody here in Tanzania uses it. So for companies looking now to bring applications, for example, we didn't have logistics companies, but with mobile wallet becoming a key factor here in Tanzania, it just launched this year from the team from MIA was the first e-commerce company that was listed on the New York Stock Exchange, I believe late last year. So, it's still in its early days. Uber only entered Tanzania 2 years ago as well. So again, the fact that M-Pesa is in play definitely opens up new opportunities for companies looking to bring applications or computer software in other key sectors such as healthcare and just looking at any other essential services in order to help companies or SMEs simplify operations. There's definitely a strong need or a lack to really push operations forward. I see training and a lack of capital, of course, is a bit of an issue as well. and also for to African markets, because each with mobile payments coming into play, many of the challenges for the manufacturing sector, economy. The Tanzanian government is now prioritizing vision as a pathway for. So the manufacturing sector in Tanzania, another key products including beverages, paper, plastics. Of course, with COVID, opportunity for that. For many of our neighboring countries, I think there's still different types of lockdown for COVID, and I think we're all caught off guard, and the need for masks and gloves and this kind of thing. There was a huge market opportunity there and a huge gap within the market. Tanzania is more open at this point. We don't have as many COVID restrictions, but remember, as I mentioned, we are surrounded by 8 other neighboring countries, of which 6 of them are landlocked. So there's definitely a huge opportunity there. Also, Tanzania's industrial sector contributes 25% of the country's GDP at the moment, but it's had an annual growth rate of 8% over the last 5 years. The general industrial structure is comprised of manufacturing, processes, and assembly industries. Now, the opportunities within manufacturing are coming about because Tanzania's consumers a heightened interest in brands, particularly among the young and the affluent. Currently, depending on where you're getting your data, I think about 40 to 44 or 45% of the Tanzanian population is under 20 years old. Also, with lifestyles getting busy and eating habits changing and becoming a little more westernized. Of course, with COVID, also the idea of working from home. We've seen a rise of companies, for example, that do packaging products because there's been heightened use of packages during this period. And again, just to touch on proximity and access to neighboring East African countries. For companies also coming down here to, for example, looking at agriculture, and as I said, there's a huge number of NGOs that are working out here in different, we own different cash crops for Tanzania. Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi are covered by EU's Everything But Arms initiative, under which all products from LDC countries, except from arms and ammunition, have preferential access to the EU market. So you have companies coming and farming here and exporting abroad due also to the affordable labor. Together with other sub-Saharan African countries, East African Community Partner States also qualify for duty-free access to the US market under the African Growth and Market Opportunity Act. Now, this is with the exception of Burundi, whose eligibility was revoked in January 2016. If I can just quickly touch on the mining sector just before I close. Tanzania said the mining sector is one of the leading sectors here in Tanzania, contributing about only 3% to annual GDP. But Tanzania is said to have the largest gold reserves in Africa, behind South Africa, making the country a major focus for exploration and development of gold on the African continent. Prospecting done revealed that some 130 million tons of gold reserves are present in Tanzania. The discovery and exploration of gold in Tanzania offers one of the best areas for investment. Tanzania is also the 4th largest gold producer in Africa after South Africa, Ghana, and Mali, and is the sole producer of the precious stone Tanzanite in the world. So similar to agriculture, there's definitely for companies that can bring machineries working within this sector. One of the biggest problems is in terms of supply and hiring equipment, and also supply and geographical services, refining. These are some of the key opportunities for those looking to, for any mining companies looking towards coming to Tanzania, and just looking at which area you can enter into, even if you're not coming to particularly explore. But as I mentioned, something like logistics is a key problem. So yes, I'll just leave it at that. And yes, Abby, I'll give it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and thank you, Roderick. Next slide, please. I'm just going to speed up the last two slides because we have run out of time. Essentially, our trade and foreign direct activities on behalf of Enterprise Florida have remained robust, even through many months of lockdown. It's just taken on a virtual form. So we continue to stay connected and relevant in the markets that we cover. And this is through by facilitating government-to-government linkages, business-to-business linkages, now virtually. We also stay very networked with our strategic partners in the respective markets and all over the continent. The one thing that has proved to be invaluable in relationship with our strategic partners is their kindness and generosity with the market reports that are shared with us. So I just want to encourage you, if you would like to look at the possibility of sourcing a market report from us, it's very comprehensive. It's everything from descriptions of the industry, the supply chain, the geography, the size and state of industries, touching on regulations, the influencing factors, even a SWOT analysis, industry associations, and then South African companies that are operating within these sectors. We don't have market reports for every single industry, but we have for most of the Florida high innovation industries that we promote. And finally, again, with our virtual trade facilitation services, in addition to the virtual business matchmaker, should there be a virtual trade event that you would like us to inquire of, that relates to your industry sector, we'd be glad to connect you with organizers to make sure that you get to exhibit and that you get to connect with the market. Next slide, please. Lastly, this just give you some idea of the strategic partner network that we cooperate with, that we collaborate with, and it includes all levels of governments in South Africa, in Kenya and Tanzania. This just paints the picture for South Africa, but this is replicated in East Africa markets as well. Local, provincial, national governments, partners, all the chambers of commerce, the industry associations, and then our strongest partner is the US Commercial Service. Their sub-Saharan Africa is headquartered, their office is headquartered in Johannesburg. And where we don't have physical boots on the ground, we leverage off the US Commercial Service to help Florida companies with opportunities in every market on the continent where they have staff and personnel. So yeah, I want to thank you for just your listening and engaging with us, and I'll hand over to, I think, Joseph now. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. Very good presentation from you, Roderick and Emmanuel. So the question is why you should consider Africa, the three continents that we spoke about. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So here is a map of our Enterprise Florida international offices around the world. And because our focus today is on the African market. So, but again, this is just a highlight of or image of our international offices all around the world, where we can connect you to continue to do business with the world. And the places that we do not have offices, as Abigail just spoke about, we leverage the services of the US Commercial Service to support Florida companies to enter those markets. Next slide. So, one of the tools that we have to help you in this pandemic, given the fact that we are unable to travel, is what we call the Virtual Business Matchmaking Program. And of course, it is designed to connect our Florida companies with decision makers, with channel partners across the world. People that you think would be, you want to connect with to help you sell your product, promote your product in those markets in itself. Of course, it's supported by a grant for qualified companies, and it's open to manufacturers and professional service providers. It's great in that it allows our offices around the world to do the heavy due diligence on potential distributors in the market and come back to you, the Florida company, informing you of what opportunities are available, and eventually to have you engage those partners through a virtual communication. Again, given the fact that you are unable to travel, which would definitely save you expense on hotel and airfare as well. Let's move on, next slide. So as I said, it's our criteria is very simple, that you have to be registered and a registered business in Florida. I think an important aspect of it is that you are export ready, meaning that the product or service that you are providing is something that is welcome or in demand in the market that you are pursuing. We don't want now, yes, you may be a manufacturer, but if the demand for the product doesn't exist, we will come back and tell you with a report that it doesn't, the market doesn't exist. But more importantly, there may be other factors. Maybe the competition of the product, the price, or the tariffs or duties that's leveraged against those kinds of products. But we will give you an honest opinion as to why you should continue identifying a partner in the market, or why we don't think at this point in time it's the right time for you to enter this market in itself. Next slide, please. So let me turn it over to my colleague, Mike Cooney. But I would just want to advise all of the participants on the call to type in your chats in the chat box so that we could address any questions that you may have. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, presenters. That was excellent information. We are running a little over, but if everyone will hang on just a few more minutes, we'll continue on with a few more comments, and we'll also entertain at least one or two questions. So with that, as Joseph just described, the virtual business matchmaking as it relates specifically to Africa, as you can see from these flyers, we do cover literally all the world, or at least a very large portion of it. So we have Asia covered through Singapore, Japan, and Hong Kong, as well as Taiwan. And then on the other side, we have as well most of Europe covered, and Canada plus Mexico. So please keep those in mind. If you missed the virtual business matchmaking webinars for those locations, please let me know, or Joseph, and we'll send you information about them. The one for Canada is coming up, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier that I work with colleagues from throughout the state. You can see the various regions that each of us cover, and they will be your primary points of contact if you are within the region. So we'll put up a slide in just a moment that will also have their contact information in more detail. I would also add, for those of you who may come in late on the presentation, you will receive a copy of this presentation via a PDF. You will also receive a link to the recording if you missed anything, and you will have an opportunity to interact with us after the webinar. Next slide, please. So the takeaways are this: Africa is obviously a dynamic region for Florida exports. We have a range of programs and grants, 5 grants to be exact, with a couple of subsets that deal with virtual options. The matchmaking grant reimbursement is for 100% of whatever the cost is in that country, and it depends on the country cost. The majority, or I should say the most expensive, would be in Europe, which is approximately or is $2,500 for 5 pre-qualified meetings, at least five pre-qualified meetings. And then, of course, the local trade specialist that I've already mentioned. Next slide, please. Here again are those folks that I mentioned. I'm in Central Florida. You can see where the others are. You'll receive this in the so that you can reach out to them as need be. Next slide, please. And I want to give this another plug. This is, again, a unique opportunity for Florida companies to be on the world stage without having to leave the comfort of your office or your home. So if you are interested, we have a maximum of only 150 companies that can register as exhibitors representing Florida companies, and we are well on our way to that. So please, please, please reach out to your either trade manager or Joseph or myself, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you may have and try to get you signed up. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have one more of these webinars coming up for Canada on December 1st, and you will receive information on how to register for that if you have not already. And next slide, please. I'll leave this one up while I ask a couple of questions. So I would like to just throw this one out to anyone who would like to answer. What are some government's initiatives to improve ease of doing business in your respective countries? So what are your governments doing to help improve the exchange of goods and services? Abigail?
Sorry, Mike, can you repeat the question? I was busy in the Q&A. Go for it.
No worries. Yeah. So what are some of the government's initiatives to improve ease of doing business in the countries that are represented on the call?
Are we talking about ease of doing business in the market itself, or again with the intra-Africa trade?
I would say both, but let's say for goods coming specifically into Africa from outside.
Well, at the moment, there aren't there isn't anything inhibiting trade. Like I mentioned in my presentation, South Africa is a free market. It's an open economy, especially very US friendly. We have lots of foreign companies that have set up here, established businesses here. So it's a pretty open market. In terms of intra-Africa trade, I mentioned the Africa Intercontinental Free Trade Agreement that potentially allows for cooperation, collaboration, and movement of goods and services between the region. And this is 54 countries. We're waiting for the finalized sign-off on that. The date has been moved to December for just the finalization of the tariff concessions. And the intent there is to ease the tariff on 90% of goods between markets. So that in itself is, I think it's a great move towards cooperation within the region and ensuring that products that are imported can freely flow throughout the rest of the continent.
Okay, thank you very much. This next question is for Emmanuel. Emmanuel, if you could come on, please. Do local distributors have the ability to tap into neighboring markets? So if a distributor is in your country, does that give them ease in being able to get their products into other markets close by?
Thanks, Mike. Yes, the answer is yes. I mentioned in my presentation that there's a very robust culture of intra-trade within the region. We're doing $6 billion a year of trade within amongst ourselves as East African nations. And so an entry into Kenya is effectively, an entry into 50 million population Kenya is effectively an entry into a 200 to 250 million population of 5 countries in the region. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. I think it does. And lastly, Roderick, is there anything that you would like to add about your country and what might exporters be able to take away from the presentation? Roderick, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Just worried a little bit about the connection, as you mentioned, I was lagging a little bit. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. But yes, as Abby and Emmanuel mentioned, most of the countries within East Africa are open markets. You can definitely do business, getting a channel into one definitely simplifies entering other countries. Of course, there's a difference between, let's say, when you're talking about South Africa and talking about a place like Kenya. Many distributors that are working within Tanzania, depending on which products we're talking about, because for a place like Tanzania, agriculture is still the main sector. So you can find there's still a commonality of if you're working with, a distributor here in Tanzania, most likely he could have contacts or connections in another market. One thing I just want to point out is there is a lot of trade shows that happen for different sectors, whether it's construction, whether it's medical products, just whatever depending on the sector that, sorry, I don't know which sector the individual is mainly asking about, but there's lots of different trade shows that happen. If it's construction, will happen in Kenya, will happen in Rwanda, will happen in Tanzania. So this is just a way of if companies would like to do business within East Africa, of just coming to visit one of these trade shows and being able to meet with the different players within the sectors.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, Joseph, for, of course, handling the portion as we specifically were talking about Africa. Thank you, Lynn Byers, who's behind the scenes making all of this go smoothly. Once again, all of the participants will be receiving a copy of the slide deck via PDF. You'll also be getting a link to the presentation in case you missed anything. And of course, feel free to reach out to your individual trade managers within the regions where you may be located. We thank everyone for being part of this, and please stay safe, stay well, and we look forward to the next webinar.